Good morning. Welcome to New Center Maine's Political Brew. We are joined this morning by longtime Democratic activist Betsy Sweet and former Republican State Senator Phil Harriman. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
The Maine Republican Party this week condemned Senator Susan Collins for her vote to convict former President Trump on that charge of inciting the insurrection at the Capitol. The letter is signed by 38 state party officials who wrote that the party's grassroots are almost universally outraged by the impeachment trial. Collins says the focus should be on growing the party rather than on one particular leader. Party condemns her vote while still thanking Collins for her support of the party and county committees and individual candidates. Phil, let me start with you since it's your party. What do you make of that, Stan?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the people who are involved in the party infrastructure, serving on county committees and state committees, tend to be the most passionate, perhaps more conservative than most voters. And they stood behind the president because they felt as though, the trial, if you will call it that, in the Senate was unconstitutional, and it was a waste of time, and the results ultimately showed that. And I think on the other side, Susan Collins is basically saying, look, I made a tough decision. Let's move on. The focus should be on building the party, not condemning people who are already party members.
But it also seems she's trying to point out that apparently a lot of Republicans in Maine are not ready to move on from Donald Trump, not willing to do that.
Well, I think that's probably true. Look at how strong he has been in both elections in the 2nd Congressional District. Those people have not abandoned him. And I think there are people who feel like he was an outsider who came to inside to shake up Washington. And that's what they truly believe needs to happen. And that has not gone away, Pat.
Betsy, what do you make of it?
Well, I think it's indicative of a party that's at war with itself. I think we see the Republican Party has these factions, one which is, the more strong Republican Party of Olympia Snowe and Bill Cohen and Susan Collins. And then there's the Republican Party of Donald Trump. And I think that we're seeing it play out in Maine. We're also seeing it play out across the country. And they're going to have to come to grips with it. And I think the point she made, which is she is the last elected official, Republican official nationally in New England, shows that there is a tone deafness to the issues that people really care about. And I think the betrayal that Phil talked about that people feel isn't related to party, but is related to how people are feeling. And I think the Republican Party has got to get more in step with what's really happening in people's lives.
And that's an important point too, Phil, the idea that there are no Republicans in New England who are in federal office save Susan Collins.
That's a valid point. And if we're going to have the balance in our country between the role of government and the role of private sector, we need people like Susan Collins to be a voice in our legislative halls. And for her to be the only one in New England should tell Republicans we need to make sure that we're more inclusive rather than more restrictive.
Looking back at the impeachment vote last weekend, and given what we saw there, Betsy, do you think can any president ever be convicted by 67 votes? And does it mean that any president can get away with any behavior they want in the last month of a presidency?
Look, if we can't convict someone who spent months organizing essentially a coup against his own government, if that's not impeachable offense, then I don't know how we ever come up with something that is. And so I think it's very difficult. And I do think it sets a very dangerous precedent. And, the irony of Mitch McConnell saying, well, he was terrible, but, we didn't do it while we were in session, when he told everyone to go home so that they wouldn't do it. I mean, the whole thing was just amazing. And I think that it makes it very difficult. And again, if what happened is not an impeachable offense, I don't know how low the bar has to go.
And Phil, you weighed in on this last weekend when it first happened. But I guess the first question is, does impeachment ever change anything? It seems an impossible bar to clear.
Yeah, I think what we're going to find out, Pat, is through the lens of history, that will become clearer whether an offense allegedly of this nature would actually have consequences. I think it's too close at this point in time for people to say, oh, wow, we've had a chance to go through all of the facts and figures and details. And if this ever happened again, yeah, we would bar someone from running for office.
Now, President Joe Biden finally has the spotlight all to himself with the impeachment trial over, and his window for action is open. Phil, where should Joe Biden be spending his political capital right now?
Well, I think following up on the rhetoric that he said in his inauguration, that he wants to be inclusive, and whether you voted for me or not, I want to work with you. I think he needs to begin to demonstrate that, as opposed to what we've seen come out in all these executive orders and some of the proposed legislation that seems to be very one-sided, very liberal. That's not going to serve him well over the next midterm elections. I think he really needs to find ways now to engage Republicans in issues that they can make progress on.
Betsy?
Yeah, I disagree with you, Phil. I think that surprisingly, I think that the unity has to be with the American people. And I think he is doing that. And that is, I think he has to concentrate on three things: COVID relief package and getting these vaccines out and making sure that we get our economy back, because we dealt effectively with this, with the epidemic. I think, secondly, the underlying thing of this epidemic, which is healthcare, which again is not a partisan issue among American people. And the third thing is climate change. He has to spend his political will on those three things and make it happen. And then we're going to see some real good stuff happen.
Yeah, your signal seized up a second there, but climate change is your third point, and
Yeah.
that certainly is a gigantic problem to try to solve. This past week, the Catholic Church in Maine was pushing back on the Mills administration, objecting to new rules on religious gatherings, calling them unacceptable. And the governor extended the state of civil emergency, and it's going to now be a full year in effect. Betsy, has it lost its urgency with people after this much time? Should the governor keep extending the emergency and keeping these limits on places like churches who say we can expand, we can have far more people safely?
Yeah, I do understand. I get it. We are all tired of this epidemic. We all wish we could rip off those masks and go gather at churches and restaurants and places. But I think she's doing what she has to do. We have to follow the science. We had that big spike in cases. We are now starting to make some progress with it. And I think that we just have to be as creative as we've been doing Zoom until we can get this thing under control. Because if we see these new variants come in, I think she's doing what she has to do, and it's politically unpopular, but I think she's following the science and what public health experts say. We got to hold tight.
Phil?
I'm gathering more and more comments from viewers of the Political Brew who I cross paths with, who are saying, follow the science. It's okay for kids to get back to school. Let's open the schools up. And I think if the numbers continue to come down and the vaccinations continue to spread, we're going to get to a place very quickly where I think the governor can release her power on the executive authority, and we can begin to safely begin a normal life again. I sure hope they do follow the science. It is time for, in my opinion, our children to get back to school.
This week, Congressman Jared Golden introduced two bills to slow the flood of political money moving to social media advertising and fighting the spread of disinformation, and help block foreign influence in American elections. Phil, do you think there's any chance of success, that Congress is going to go ahead with this?
Boy, I sure hope so. Who could argue with this sleight of hand money flowing into social media, authored by people who may not have the capability or the integrity or the intellect to put out the messages, the influence of foreign money in our elections? Who's against that? Yeah, I hope he is successful.
What do you think, Betsy? I know this is a big issue for you.
Yeah, I know. And I feel like this bill was awesome, and we have to start treating social media the way we treated television advertising, because this is where people are getting their information. And I will say it is the teeny tip of the iceberg. Making sure that we know that an ad on Facebook is an ad and not real content, not fact, is awesome, and it's great. And it's a start, but it's a slow start, man, because this problem is huge.
Governor Janet Mills is scheduled to deliver her annual State of the State address Tuesday, but it will be done virtually. No joint session of the Maine legislature. Betsy, what do you want to hear from the governor?
I want to hear that she is going to use the spending of the state budget to help the people in need. There's a lot of political pressure. There's always a lot of political posturing about budget spending. We have people in Maine who are desperate, without jobs, small businesses who are desperate. We need to spend money, unfortunately, in this time of crisis to make sure that our economy stays, but more importantly, that people, vulnerable people, are taken care of. And I want her to stand up and state the need and say, we are going to have a budget that meets this moment. That's what I'm hoping to hear.
Phil, what do you want to hear in the State of the State this week?
I want her to go back to her inaugural address when she took the oath of office and build on those themes that you and I covered that night, Pat. I thought it was the right tone for Maine at the right time. And if she can weave that into a forward-looking, here's where the end of this pandemic is in sight. Our kids are going to go back to school. We're going to drop down these restrictions. We're going to open up the economy. We're going to welcome tourists and all the things I think that people are so ready to hear. And if she can back that up with and here's how we can do it safely. Here's where the science says it works. This is how the vaccinations are going to make an impact. I think that would be a great State of the Union address.
It would be nice to offer some hope like that. Yeah. All right, let's wrap up with our winners and losers in politics this week. Betsy, we'll start with you.
So the losers are Ted Cruz and the elected officials in Texas who are headed to Cancun and blaming what happened on the Green New Deal, which hasn't passed yet, instead of trying to figure out how do we help people and make sure the kids and elderly and folks hospitals are not freezing to death. So they are my big losers. And the winner today is a little unusual. The winner today is the Kennebec County Commissioners, who voted unanimously to remove the statue of Melville Fuller, who was the 8th Supreme Court Justice in the United States under Grover Cleveland. He was the person who was the architect of Plessy versus Ferguson, which basically indoctrinated and put in law separate but equal. So he kept a lot of the Jim Crow laws in, a lot of racist things in place back then. But they did it right. They're removing the statue from a place where he is honored and venerated and moved it to its historical context, and they're going to remove it from where it is and put it in museums where we can learn about it, but we are not celebrating it.
And Phil, your winners and losers this week.
Well, Betsy and I seem to be on the same page as it relates to losers. Ted Cruz, the political optics were awful, but I also want to add in Texas, it's a lesson to the rest of America that our backup systems for heat and electricity need to be better coordinated between all forms of energy. And my winner this week is close to home. The Northern Lights medical community in central and northern Maine have brought forward the vaccination process. It appears to be a model for others to follow.
All right, thank you both. Yeah, good stuff. That's going to do it for Political Brew this week. We thank you for joining us. See you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.